Yeah, my topic is basically what is NLP, how does it connect with Wingwave, and how does hypnosis fits into this picture, and would like to share a bit about NLP coaching and how I use it with my with coaches as a coach here in the US. I'm here in Los Angeles. Yeah, so I'm going to start, right? Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
basically, yeah.
Go ahead. The stage
Okay.
is yours.
All right.
Have fun.
Yeah, I'm Christiane Neumann. I'm a licensed NLP practitioner, master practitioner and trainer, as well as a certified Wingwave coach here in Los Angeles. And I'm very excited to talk about NLP because, similar to Daniela, this particular modality or method has helped me in my life specifically, especially after a car accident with PTSD and trauma and long time of surgeries, etc. So for me, NLP is something that's very close to my heart, and I love it. And that's how I also learned about Wingwave. Or I have to slow down, I think, a bit. That's how I learned about Wingwave, because EMDR is part of it, which is part of neuro-linguistic programming. Which is, let me just go back a step here. Sorry, it's kind of early here in Los Angeles and my coffee hasn't really kicked in yet. So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Neuro for the brain, linguistic for language and how we communicate with ourselves and the world. And then we have programming, which is the internal processes and the habits that we have formed consciously or unconsciously. And I love it so much because this is what I wanted to go back to. I've learned about Wingwave because NLP is part of, it's one part of the Wingwave method, and also the EMDR, which I really love, the integration, the eye integration, which is now also the bilateral stimulation. So there's so much more research done about this. And it just intrigued me to learn more about that as well. So, and it's a combination that I'm also using with my coaches, and it's very helpful. So about NLP, just a brief question here in the round. Who has already knowledge about NLP? Just raise your hand or give me some kind of signal. Oh, you have already? You already, Carl? Okay, Amor, okay. Someone else? Anyone else? Or okay, so then I will talk a little bit about the history. So where does it come from? It comes from California. Basically, it was developed in the early 70s with Dr. Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Those two people found that, or basically Richard was in a house, sitting in the house for someone, a professor, reading about psychology books, and noticed that the books always showed and talked about all the diagnosis, etc., but not really how people can be helped. So he thought about how can people be helped. He asked different questions about it. And he then got together with the linguistic professor, John Grinder, and both of them developed a program, strategies, and like a recipe, basically, how to help people. And how they did it was they modeled really successful people. For example, successful therapists like Virginia Satir, family therapist, Milton Erickson, one of the best hypnotists in the world at that time, and still probably is one of the best. And then also Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy, and other people that were very successful in what they did. By modeling them, finding out their successful strategies, what to do, they learned how to use those strategies and apply that, giving them to other people, and they could do similar successful things. So they were basically looking at what works. At the same time, they were talking to people who overcame things like phobias, addiction, and so on, and found out their strategies as well. So that's how the phobia cure came about in NLP, because Richard basically paid people who overcame their phobias. And one of the marks that he noted was that people would say, enough is enough. I just simply had enough and I changed what I did. So that was one of the steps, that we have to get to a point sometimes, enough is enough, like a threshold, like a compulsion to do something differently. Well, so in this whole process, they found out how we process our experiences in the world, because we know that it's relatively subjective, right? So we all experience the world a little differently. I was just walking with my neighbor 2 days ago, and just by the height difference, I'm not that tiny, but he is very tall. So we were walking along the neighborhood, and he was able to look beyond over the fences. So his experience of the world was different, because he could see the dog on the grass behind the fence, and I couldn't. So just the incoming experiences already, what comes into our neurology, starts to form how we represent the world, how we experience the world. And then we have the senses in general that we have. We see, we hear, we feel, we touch, we taste. And we smell, of course, that one as well, important. And this is how we then get the information in our brain. And then it goes through several filters: our beliefs, our values, what's important to us in life, our previous experiences, etc. There's lots and lots of things that come that go through there. And with NLP, we like to think that we can step in where we create, when we can change, basically, or when we are in power and control of what we think. That creates what we feel, that creates what we do, and that creates what we then have as a result. The feeling and the thinking can be interchanged sometimes, because when we get out of the bed in a wonderful morning, well slept, we slept well, then it's easier to take the incoming experiences sometimes than if we would get out of the bed the wrong side of the bed. So that kind of, also being in a good mood already, being all pumped up and so on, we can take information differently in than if we were in a different state. So state control, being in the right state, the right emotion, is really important, how we then also create our things. So physiology, our mood, our experience, our thinking creates then what our behavior is. So, and what I would like to go through, because there's so much in NLP that we cannot talk about in the short time that we have together, but I would like to talk about a bit what we keep in mind while we are coaching with NLP. And I know a lot of people might have that coaching experience already. And I would like to bring up what's maybe different, which invite you basically to notice what's new, or compare it, or take it as a refresher for yourself. So when we do NLP coaching, we keep the logical levels of change in mind, meaning besides noticing what the person is talking about, when we do the change, we always want to run them through the next level, the logical level, to bring them up towards their values and identity, because values are so important in our life. If someone comes in and, for example, I had a client who was thinking about her coaching work, and that she felt worries about being rejected. And I was asking her a few things about it. And when we worked about the work, the belief feeling rejection would be, difficult for her and so on, we worked on that one. And then we also went on the next level, would be the values, her contribution, how she could help the client, how much value she is actually adding to someone's life. And then we added that to her coaching as an identity. She's a coach. So we went through the next level. And then I gave her some future pacing. After she felt better, we added some future pacing, letting her play this out in the environment, basically. And then we added from a few more steps to her, what she can do in case there would be rejection. And then we added that again to the belief, the values, her identity, and we let that run a few times until she actually felt pretty good about possibly any rejection that could come her way. When we change behavior, we give also alternative choices, of course. That's really important. We never want to leave a void or a vacuum for the client. For example, I had a client who wanted to give up drinking, and she did in the end. And we found what's alternatively, what could she do in the evening? Because she loved to sit with her husband, and her husband always had a beer in the evening. And she felt the impulse usually to drink with that person. And so now it was, what can you do instead? What is there that you could join and have also something to drink, but what would you like? And so she found that tea drinking in the evening, a particular tea, and she went through different tastes and all that, flavors. She found a tea that she liked. So now she drinks tea in the evening with him, and she enjoys that as well, because it's more about the company. But she felt left out not having a drink in her hands, basically. And so basically giving something as an alternative choice, filling in that void is really important, forming new habits with that one. Also, sometimes we need to push the person a little bit further, and that's going through the threshold. For smoking, for example, making it so unpleasant, getting into the visualization of smoking and how that influences the health and how that makes, the risk of health, and making it to think of all the memories that they wish they would have not smoked, or how loved ones might look at them when they are sick or might pass away from the smoking consequences, and making it really, really kind of really, really uncomfortable, having them cough and really go fully into it. And by that threshold, we might push them so that they don't want to actually, it doesn't give them what they were looking for. And then giving them something alternatively to cope with what behind is there, maybe the stress level, how to cope with stress. So working always on the root cause of why that coping mechanism was installed, and help them for a while. So then a session usually would start with the well-formed goals. Like, this is something you probably know also from other areas of coaching. We want to make sure that they state what they want in the positive. Most people come to me and they say, oh, I don't want this anymore. No, I don't want that anymore. And it really takes some pushing to ask them and to get them to say, what do you want instead? Until they have a clear picture, like a GPS for their mind, what they want. It's difficult to really get there and get the unconscious mind and everyone involved to get there. And then we also want to make sure it's self-initiated, so that it's in control of the person. Making someone else love us is difficult. It's not in our control, really. So really, that's important fact, that we have to be able to self-initiate it and self-maintain that goal and our outcome that we want. And then also sensory based. This is really, really important to get the full senses, again, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling involved, to be closest to the experience, to be fully there, to be associated with that moment, to seeing it through our own eyes, feeling it, letting the body basically experience what we would like to experience. Also very helpful to find out, when do we know that we have it, that what we want, so that when we have that experience, that full experience, then we know, oh yeah, I have achieved what I was aiming for. And then important also to see the ecology of our goal. For example, if someone has a high value family life is important, and then they want to make it big in their career, there might be a conflict with the family or even within themselves. It might be hindering them because they have that strong value of family. So the ecology around us in the world and for ourselves, that stays in a good place, that is agreement within. That's really important. We always like to start with that. I usually send out a form to my clients that before I start the session with them, that there are certain points that I would like to, these are some of the points and some other questions, specifically what they want, when they want it, when maybe not, what's stopping them so far, etc. And then when I have that intake form or the information form, I ask myself, what has to be so that what they want to change is a problem, or how do they create that problem? NLP is very much about processes. So we can change things, we're doing things, we're creating our emotions, we're creating our thoughts, and we can change them. That's why I find it so empowering. NLP for me empowered me to take control again of my thinking, my brain, my neurology, and making use of the brain between my ears. And what's really helpful there is to check the meta model. It's one of the linguistic parts. Linguistic coaching is in NLP very important, and this is part of Wingwave too, right? So the meta model in NLP gives us the information It's information gathering. It clarifies the model of the world that the other person has developed, what's going on really in their model of the world, how they're seeing things, why they're giving it that meaning, and so on. And we can then challenge that model, because what usually happens is that we have an experience, the event, which is at the bottom. So the closest to that one is the deeper structure. The deeper structure that we have is our mental processing, the meaning that we give something. And that's also associated with all our senses. Again, that's why bringing all the senses into coaching is so important. And then we have the surface structure. That's when people talk to us, and we can notice that they usually use a lot of deletion, distortions, and generalizations in that surface structure. So someone might say, they never listen to me, or I can't do that. There's a lot of deletion in there. So let me just briefly explain to you about what I mean: deletion, distortions, generalizations. These are the three human model processes that everyone uses universally. Deletions are, and all of these are actually important. So deletions are really helpful, because if we would get all the information at the same time, we would be overwhelmed. For example, we don't need everything at the same time. Feeling, for example, that you're sitting maybe on a couch or in a chair, you might have not noticed that until I mention it now, that you're sitting on a surface, or your feet in your shoe, in your socks, or in your shoes. Those are things that we don't have to be aware of all the time. And sometimes it can be though that we are missing out information. Like when I was walking with my neighbor, I was so intensely in that conversation that I missed certain houses that we walked by, and he said, "Oh, did you see that earlier?" And I completely missed it, because I was so involved, I was so narrow focused in that conversation, that I missed what's going on the outside, basically. And that's sometimes when we are missing information, that could be limiting or impoverishing our model of the world, of course, because we're not experiencing it. And distortions are when, for example, the neighbor walked by and we were greeting the neighbor, and the neighbor was just squinting at us and then walked by, and we were both like, what's happening? Is he grumpy? He doesn't like us? What's going on? Did we do something wrong? And then later on, we met the neighbor again, and it was just that he forgot his glasses, so he couldn't see well. And all he did was he didn't recognize us and wasn't even quite sure where that hello came from, so he just walked on. So distortions can also then make a big difference for us how we experience the world. And generalizations, again, also, these are good in a certain way, because I'm sitting on a chair. I know this is a table. I know this is universally, this is what happens. I sit on a chair. I don't sit on the table usually. If there's a door somewhere in the wall, I know that's an entrance or it's an exit. And I can use that. I can make use of that using universal information. I don't have to learn that every time again. But when we overgeneralize it, that can impoverish our experience in the world or how we move through the world. For example, I had a visitor from Germany. And if I'm still right about this, at least at that time, in Germany, the mailboxes are yellow, little yellow boxes. So my visitor came here and wanted to mail some postcards to the friends in Germany. And so she walked outside, came back after some time and said, "You don't have mailboxes here in America." And I had to laugh, because it's like, how do you come to that conclusion? And she explained it, that she was looking for the mailboxes, and it turned out that mailboxes here are blue, not yellow. So she had overgeneralized the information that she had, and that was incorrect. And so that didn't help her to find the right mailboxes. So we ask these questions clients, and this is part of meta model, to find out the information. We notice that there's always deletion, generalization, and distortions. And within that kind of model, we use usually particular questions to find out more specifically what they are saying, or to get a clearer idea of what they're talking about, what their picture is, and what we understand from their explanations, to see how they may be creating that problem or where the impoverishment is. For example, And we ask how, who, when specifically, when they're talking about something that's not clear to us, and it might bring them clarity too. Then according to whom, if there's a judgment in there, people shouldn't do that, or this should be done differently. And then we can ask, well, according to whom? And it might turn out they had picked up that information from childhood, that that they should do it a certain way. But that's not necessarily correct information at this point anymore, or where they're living. And so it could be updated. It's about updating sometimes the information that we have from our childhood, the imprinting stages between 0 and 7 years old, basically. And we take all the information in like little sponges, and that becomes our reality in life. And then we ask also, how do you know this? How did you come to that conclusion? What made you think that? And then we find out maybe their thinking process about it, and there might be the deletion, generalization, or distortion involved in there again. Or also people like to use these words like, oh, that never happens. I can never do this. Or they always do this. They never listen to me, and so on. And they're using these universal quantifiers, as we call them. And that kind of limits their world, because there is no possibility of change. Is something is always that way or never that way. And so we like to ask them, truly they never listen to you, or you've not been able to do that at least one time or so. And so we're loosening up that model of the world, because most people then have to admit, well, maybe not never or not always, and so on. And that helps them to find maybe new choices in there as well. And so there's also something in the meta model which is called the model operators, which is a very interesting process of motivation to get us from one modality to the next of what we're doing or how we motivate us. So for example, try on, if you wanted to take a day off just for yourself, as a little experiment for yourself, if you wanted to take a day off from work, right? What will get you to take off that day? Listen into yourself and notice how that might be different. If I say, I should take the day off, I have to take the day off, I need to take a day off, I want to take a day off, I wish I could take a day off, I will take the day off, I'm going to take the day off. So I wonder if you noticed how that maybe changes the way that you think about taking the day off. And so there are certain things that we can do for ourselves. Like I said, linguistic coaching in different ways is part of Wingwave as well, to find specific situations and to maybe changing the limiting beliefs there as well, or clarifying, and challenging there as well. And how we can use that in our daily life might be also interesting, because there's this exercise that we can do for ourselves. And I do that also, and have to do it probably a little bit more, have to. So basically what we can do is we can tape ourselves or record ourselves on the phone, or write down our thought processes. And then we can challenge ourselves and see how we came to that conclusion and what makes us think the certain way. And particular things that stand out are, again, the model operators. Do I say, I should have not eaten that cheesecake? I should have not done that, or so. Is that helpful? Would that get us next time to say, I should do this instead? Will it make us actually do what we think we should do? Or is there a different way of saying it? I really want to do this, or I wish I could do this, or I need to do this. I have actually a client who really works well with, I need to do this. It gives them that kind of force. Where other people, I have someone who likes to use, I want to, because then it gives them the feeling that they're making that decision. It's their decision and they feel not pushed by anyone else. So there are certain ways that can help us to be aware of these things, what really motivates us to get from one to the other. And that might be context related as well. It might be different in our relationship, in business, or in family situations, or in other leisure time situations. And then Also paying attention to our universal quantifiers. Again, this never, always, this happens, never, always, nobody, everybody, all the time. So there's no limit to that, basically. I have a client who was using it probably in almost every sentence. And until we pointed it out, or I pointed it out to him, and then he worked with this, it changed how he operates in the world now, because there's more opportunity and more options for him, and not so limited view of what he can do, choice, because now he says, well, yeah, sometimes, or most of the times, but it's not always and never. So that's really helpful for him. So he changed his view of the world just by changing that, basically. And you might find other things. How did I come to that conclusion? According to whom is that the choice that I have to make, or do this or do that? And who's saying that actually? Is that my voice that I'm hearing, or is it someone else's voice that I'm hearing? So there is a lot that we can do by challenging ourselves and to go really into the details of how we represent that, just linguistically, basically. And then what we also pay attention are, of course, the submodalities of hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, smelling. And that's the submodalities are the building blocks, the details of our experiences in those sort of modalities of seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, etc. So when I talk about the submodalities of seeing, it would be something is black and white, or it's color, it's sharp, it's blurry, it's maybe a big picture or a small picture. When I talk about the submodalities of auditory, of hearing, it would be, it's a nice tonality, it's fast, it's slow, it's the pitch of it, or it's something that is pleasant to the ear, or talking. So it's something that we use, we know this when we listen to a person, and what representational system, what modalities they're usually using. If someone talks about, oh, it's so nice to see you again, let me show you what I've done lately. Or so if they talk a lot in the visual fields, then they prefer maybe the visual explanations when we talk to them or so. Want to mention that can be always context related too. And we do everything all the time ourselves as well. It's not that someone is just auditory or just visual, etc., but it's that we have maybe preferences, and that might make a difference. And there are these funny stories about Virginia Satir, one of these family therapists that they modeled back in the 70s in order to create NLP. And she would have a clients come in, and the husband would say, well, I don't know what's going on. I don't think she loves me anymore. And Virginia would ask, why would you think that? And he would say, well, she never tells me that she loves me, and she never says anything, and we don't talk about it. And so it was interesting that he was in the very auditory field. And then she said, well, I show him all the time. I show him, I clean the house, I put out his clothes, I leave little notes for him, I show him things. And so they had different areas in the loving context of how to show someone, or how to bring across how they love someone, even though you would think that the written part would connect with the auditory, but it's more visual maybe for that person that he didn't connect to that. So there are different ways of listening to a person. And in the submodalities, we are again wanting to make sure that when we talk about experiences, that we have the person connected to closest to the deep structure of their experience, which would be involving all the senses again. That's really helpful. And then we also do this, I know that the Wingwave, if we have someone going into an experience and talking about their situation, we like to have them with the VAKOG involved, so they're closest to that experience, and the emotions are the strongest usually in there as well then. So then we also, and I'd like to take a quick look at the time. So I also like to mention that we are watching their eye accessing cues, because when people talk in the visual field, they're looking up usually. So when people say, oh, let me see, then they're making pictures usually, or little movies. And when people talk and they're talking very melodic or so, then they are usually in the middle field, kind of in a playing field here. And when they're emotionally or talking to themselves or so, they tend to go down right. Let me touch base with that. And they're kind of going down and they're looking down. And you notice that with depressed people, they usually would also kind of slump and look down. So we notice that when people are making pictures, I can sometimes say when I coach someone, okay, what are you looking at there right now? What's the picture that you're seeing? And then they say, oh, I didn't notice that I was making a picture. And I said, well, allow yourself to bring it to the front. And then they actually noticed that they had a memory that they were looking at. It was an unconscious process because it was so familiar to them that they were not even aware of it. So watching the person is very important. And that's why I actually like to be in front of a person, more directly in contact with them, because I can see also their gestures, if the skin tone changes, because some of the cameras don't pick up on these kind of subtle little changes that make a difference. So, but really paying attention to the whole body, basically, including how they talk with submodalities, the eye accessing cues, and also with NLP, we're using anchoring. Anchoring is a very important part of NLP. So we would usually find out what the anchors are, the triggers, the conditioning, as they say in psychology, and then we will see how that connects to the emotion, the emotional connection to the event, the stimulus response to the previous event, how that triggers them. And then we will find out how we can collapse that anchor so that we disconnect that emotional connection. And we can do it in different ways. And we do it with Wingwave, for example, when we do the waving or the bilateral stimulation, we're disconnecting that connection between the stimulus and the response, the emotional connection to it. And then we find out how we can put a better anchor into place, like a resource anchor or another anchor. And I know we do this also in Wingwave. This is how that connects there as well. When we slowly wave on something positive, setting a new anchor. Anchors can be done though, anchors can be in all sorts of areas in all five senses. For example, a visual anchor is a stop sign. Nobody needs to tell us that's a stop sign. We don't have to read it. We know what it is. We know how we're supposed to respond to that one. The same with the green light. We know that a green light means go. So nobody has to tell us. We don't have to think about it. That's an anchor for us, green. And we know acoustically, it could be an anchor if it's a good song, like, because I'm happy, something that's something, or a particular song that brings good memories. That's our song, and then we go into that emotion. So that's an anchor. And then we have other anchors, of course, like the smell of good coffee in the morning. So that could be an anchor. And a good taste, something that you like, chocolate, making us feel good just by that taste. It tastes so good. So we have these anchors, and it's interesting to know what anchors work for us and what maybe might be a trigger or an anchor that's not so helpful for us, and how we can change that and create better anchors. In NLP, we use stacking anchors that make anchors really strong. So in order to collapse an anchor, sometimes we need to get on the big uniform, basically lots and lots of good anchors, lots of good emotions, and stack them in all sorts of areas, and then see that it's so strong enough that it collapses the old anchor, the old emotion, the old belief, the old system, and then the old structure, basically. And then we have a new, stronger anchor in place that changes the belief and helps us to do that. And then we also have chaining anchors. Chaining anchors are very useful to install new strategies. How I get from A to B, what are the little steps in between? And then again, we find out the steps that we can do, and we're chaining those particular stages to that outcome, the goal that we want. And we created so that we have like a nice, smooth transition towards our goal. And important towards the end of that work, and again, we would always work through all the logical levels of change, from the environment, through the strategic, the skills that someone has, through the beliefs that we have, through the values that we have, and then connecting it hopefully also to an identity, who we are. Now we are a non-smoker. Now we living healthy. If someone wants to lose weight or so, the healthy living, we are living healthy. I'm a healthy person. I'm a coach. I'm a good mom, and something like this. We're attaching it to the belief that we have about our own identity. Usually when we change the identity level, it changes all the other levels by itself as well. How we think we can do the things that we're doing, and where we do the things that we're doing them. So it's very important to keep all that in mind. And it's too much, of course, to go in all these details in the short time that we have. And what we do in the end, we always run the future pacing. It's the mental practice in the environment, so that someone can take the new skills, the new beliefs, and run them through visually and feel how that is now for them differently and notice the difference. It's like a convincer strategy in itself there. And I know we do this also in Wingwave Connects there. We do the future pacing. We're having a person experience that in the new environment to make sure they're feeling there is this change. It's convinced, yes, I can do this now. So that's how basically an NLP coaching is with the Society of NLP. That's where I learned it. I'm not 100% sure, and Lola might kind of give me a little signal if this is how they're doing it over there as well, because I know that you do the neuro-linguistic coaching, you train it over there at the Besser's Sigmund Institute, and so I assume it's similar. And I know you're involved in the muscle testing, which I think is brilliant. So just wanted to give you that idea about NLP, what NLP is, how we use NLP in coaching. It, I think, is a great enhancing tool. It has different approaches than typical coaching, maybe with sometimes a little bit more forceful. It's a certain attitude with NLP that we believe that change is possible, and it's possible quickly. And whatever it takes to get that. Thanks, Lola. Yes. So yes, and it's possible, and how to get the person. And Richard sometimes says, Richard Bandler, the co-founder of NLP, says, we're going to get this change. We will get it. You might die while I try, but we will get that change happen. So it's that attitude of we can do this, and believing that anyone can change. And what I would like to say, besides how it connects, you also noticed while I was talking how it connects with Wingwave. I already mentioned several points, and it connects with the eye integration. I'm not quite sure if I made that clear. When you do the intervention with Wingwave, you're collapsing that anchor as well. It's part of collapsing it, disconnecting it. Yes, I said that, right? And then we're creating that new with waving it in, or with using different words, etc. And what is also something with the, I have to just quickly think, what I have not mentioned yet is that we're using metaphors as well, of course, and quotes, and we're using stories, we're using certain language patterns that move the person in that direction to help them change the belief. Yeah, and that would help them on an unconscious level very often. Again, that's what Wingwave uses as well. We're using metaphors, we're using stories, and that's hypnosis. So how does hypnosis fits into the picture then? Well, you kind of got the idea already. Hypnosis is part of it all in a way. Anytime that we go internal, when we focus internally, when we do the body scan, when we're visualizing something, when we imagine something, that's when we go internal. We kind of not seeing the outside. When we are very involved in that conversation with my neighbor, like I mentioned earlier, I was so in that conversation with my neighbor, I forgot to pay attention to the outside world, the house that we walked by, and maybe even other things that I might have missed. And that's part of being in a different state. It's a trance-like experience, but we do it all the time, all day long, basically. Imagine, or you might have had that experience driving, yeah? Have you ever had that, you arrived at a point of your destination and then you thought, oh, how did I get here? I already got here. And you might have missed the last minute of your drive because you were so focused, or maybe a song or so, but you automatically got to where you wanted to, because it's such an automatic process of driving. And also being in a movie theater or being at home watching a movie, being so involved, being maybe in the role of the hero or so, being so in there that you forgot about your living room or the audience in the movie theater. That's being in a trance-like state. That's being internally involved. That's hypnosis in a way. Also, reading a book comes just to mind. Basically, as a child already, I was reading a book. I was so involved in the story, and my mother would say, "You never hear me when I call you when you read the book." And so that's part of something that we do automatically as humans. We're using that to be very focused. It's like a heightened alertness, a heightened focus, a heightened learning state, to be really narrowed in into something. That's hypnosis. And guided meditation is hypnosis as well, because it helps us to relax and it suspends the critical thinking. That's part of hypnosis as well. And that's good to know also for ourselves. It's good to know for ourselves that certain things to be aware of can be very hypnotic, that we don't even want to be hypnotic. For example, authorities. If someone comes with a suit, right, or wears a doctor outfit, very often we simply believe what they say is true because it's an authoritative person, right? But it's so important to keep the critical thinking, the head on with the critical thinking, not just let it bypass and say, oh yeah, so-and-so has said that and that's true. No, is that really so? And how can I be sure? And how can I test it? We have that sometimes on Facebook. A good friend sends us something, forwards information on Facebook, and we just take it, oh yeah, that friend is a good friend, I trust that friend. And then we might pass on that message without checking that content of that message that we're passing on to other people. And then someone comes back and says, no, I just fact checked this and that's not true. So again, it's about keeping that critical faculty going in that sense when it's important to us in life. Also, if someone tells us something, oh, that's a scientific study, just because it sounds reasonable or plausible, it's really important to make sure that we are experiencing our model of the world and our world itself with that critical thinking and not just bypassing that. So that's basically how hypnosis fits in there. And I was wondering if there is still time for an exercise. There's so much information and there's so much more I would like to cover. I'm really passionate about this topic. But I see we're kind of running out of time, right? We have about 3 minutes left.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then I still would like to do a little resource anchoring. That's what I would like to do for you, to let you go out of this with a good feeling. So first of all, this is also a nice work with submodalities. I would like you to and invite you to go into a place that you feel very comfortable. Maybe think about your last vacation. Any place that you feel really comfortable and relaxed. And notice what you're noticing. What do you hear? What do you see? How do you breathe? And then maybe enhance that experience. Make the colors different, maybe even the sky bluer or whatever it is, make it more vivid or more calming, whatever suits you, whatever fits right now for you. Make the experience as good as you can. You can maybe add some little background music to it if you want to. And when it feels as good as you think it can get, take your thumb and any finger of that same hand and press it slightly together. hold it together and get all your senses involved. Right? So now come back to the here and now. Go of the hands. Take a quick look to the ceiling or anywhere else, we call it the breaker state. And then I would like you to maybe add something else that you think would be a good resource for you to have for the rest of the day or for the coming days. It could be like a motivation or humor or love or motivation, confidence, anything that you think would be helpful for you. Remember a time that you had an intense feeling of that and step into that memory as if it was right now and feel all with your senses that experience, how we're breathing, how you're standing, what did you hear, what are you hearing now, see what you saw, feel all the same, create that same feeling, that same experience for yourself. And when you have that full experience, use the same thumb and the same finger of that same hand and press it slightly together. Enjoy that for a moment. All right, so then come back to the here and now. And I invite you to anchor more of these. So you have now the structure of how to do this, get your full sensory input of certain things that you think will be good resources for you. Get yourself into that state, feel it as if it's right now. Remember what you heard, see what you saw, hear what you heard, feel what you felt, maybe bring in some compliments from other people, whatever you, also resources like fanfares, da, 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 da. You can make sounds, you can do everything that you want to create that in your mental as a resource and then anchor it for yourself. And the more you're stacking the anchor, so to say, that's what we call it as terminology, the better it feels and the greater that feeling of resource becomes. And when you need that resource, I wonder now, just as a test for yourself, hold those two fingers together. Do you feel something? Do you notice something for yourself? How will it be to go into a conversation with someone or a challenging situation, having a resource anchor like this? So that is just one of these things that you can do for yourself. I wanted to weave that in for yourself in a daily life, what you can do for yourself. And there's so much more. I would like to offer this because I know we are kind of now we're at the end of my presentation. Behind me, you see mindwellnesscoaching.com. On that website, when you go there, you will find a link to a free resource. You can download a free ebook about NLP, NLP for the world. Hello? NLP for the world is something that you can download for free of that word. And you can download it there for free. Hello, sorry, Lola, can you mute yourself?
Yes, it's very nice. And I think maybe you can say the last word, because now we all want to reunite to say goodbye together.
Okay, yeah. I just want to say also really quickly that if someone wants to, this is something as everyone does in these events, I also will offer a reduced cost with the code of Power of Life. And if you would like to experience a session with me, a coaching session, I will definitely have a reduced rate for you. So please contact me via mindwellnesscoaching.com. And so you, as also another resource, if you want to, there are great resources on NLP external, NLP internal, and there you will have virus prescription, sorry, I'm kind of a rhythm right now. You will find on that website, NLP Eternal, for a yearly prescription. You can find lots and lots of information with Dr. Richard Bandler about NLP. So, oh yes, writing it there. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I see that I have to come to an end. I assume that there's more coming at this moment. So please contact me for any other information. Thanks for joining me here. I hope you had a wonderful experience at this Congress and this gave you some more insights and new ideas. Thank you very much, everyone.